This is Stan, and welcome back to Interesting Ideas. And that title perhaps caught your attention. Now, a couple days ago, we began talking about people who have changed their names. And I know a person who's thinking of changing their names, and that led to a whole variety of things. And you know what? We're going to continue that discussion today on Interesting Ideas. Well, once again, we're back with Interesting Ideas, and I started our conversation just a couple days ago where I said we're going to talk to a person who knows a very interesting story about an interesting idea about somebody who changed their name. So I went back and found an old friend, and we're both old, and we've been around for a while. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Doing just fine, Stan. How are you?
I'm doing good. Well, maybe because of the world she's in, she might need to change her name. And then I thought about a story I heard that supposedly Dr. Martin Luther King had changed his name, but I couldn't trust the source, but I knew I could trust you because tell my listeners how you know Dr. Martin Luther King.
Well, I worked at WSB Radio in Atlanta for 15 years. Starting out in 1966, which was about the midpoint of Dr. King's life and career as a civil rights leader. And so I got to know him personally quite well for about 2.5 years until, of course, his assassination. And I know you're wondering about his name, and this is the true story.
I knew you would tell me the truth.
Yes, this is the truth. He was Martin Luther King Jr., his father, Martin Luther King Sr., but they weren't always Martin, the first name. It was Michael. The father, we called him Daddy King. But at one point, when Martin Luther was a little boy, Daddy King decided to change their names from Michael to Martin Luther, in honor of the Protestant leader, Martin Luther. And so they did. They both changed their names from Michael King to Martin Luther King. And that is a true story.
It really happened. And that was because he recognized that Dr. Martin Luther King, or Dr. Michael King, had this great respect for Martin Luther. And here we have a Baptist minister naming himself and his son after a Lutheran reformer, right?
That is correct. That is for sure.
Well,
but now I'll tell you another thing, Stan. Anybody that is in show business of any kind, and my career has been in broadcasting, which is sort of show business, I guess, in a way. You encounter people constantly who use stage names.
Sure.
In fact, I've shared this with you. The very first job I got as a radio announcer, my name is Robert Max Ketchersig, okay? When I was a little boy, I was Bobby, as you might expect.
Right.
And when I grew up and started working in radio, Bobby was kind of childish sounding, I guess, so I decided to call myself Bob. First job I got, a little radio station in East Tennessee up in the mountains. They hired me to work one summer. First job I'd ever had in radio. And they said, now you can't use your last name. It's too complicated. So you have to use your middle name. So I was known on the radio as Bob Max. Well, that's the only time during my career, which now is over 60 years, I guess, 62 years, I think, in radio. That's the only time I was asked not use my real name.
Other than that, you were real, right?
I was real.
Okay.
But now I've got a story or two to tell you.
Sure.
At WSB Radio, several of the DJs had fake names for one reason or another. But one of the most interesting stories, we had a news reporter went by the name of Jack Scott. A good reporter, great voice, and his real name was John Stuber. But he went by Jack Scott. Well, at some point, he left WSB, and don't know what happened to him. Well, a few years ago, I had decided to form a group of retired former announcers, DJs, news people for WSB Radio. And I had to track down all these guys and a few young ladies as well, young at the time at least, try to track them down and invite them to be a part of this WSB Old Timers group, we called it. We had 150 people, I guess.
Sure.
And everybody was, well, what had happened to so-and-so? And somebody would know. And we'd get in touch with them and sign them up. But Jack Scott was an enigma. Nobody knew what happened to Jack Scott. And I finally posted an reward. First person who can tell us where Jack Scott is going to win a reward of some kind. And that reward money is still out there. We've never tracked him down. Have no idea if he's still alive. Just he vanished.
He's under some witness protection program or something, right?
Yeah, or he's changed his name. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, it's kind of interesting. And I interviewed a lot of singers and actors and so forth over years. And some of them use their real names. A lot of them have their stage names.
Right. And ironically, right now, we're discovering that Meatloaf was not his real name.
Now, I'd have to tell you a little Meatloaf story.
Oh, my goodness, you are right with the day.
There's a lady that goes to church with me, and a few years ago, she came up to me and introduced herself to me. She said, you may not realize it, but we're related. I'm part of the Tetcherson family. And she tried to explain to me where in the family tree she fit in. And so, oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, good to meet you, all that stuff. And she said, that we're related to Meatloaf? And I said, no, I didn't know that. But I guess she knows what she's talking about. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I need to put a claim in on part of his estate or something. But I never met the guy and never listened to his music. But anyway, that's just a Meatloaf story.
Another Meatloaf story. Well, thank you, Bob. We'll be in touch. This is interesting. The stories are interesting. And then we're going to try and find out, as someone pointed out to me, it says, well, one of the things that Jesus did was he changed this guy's name to Rocky, Peter. And then, of course, why did Saul change his name to Paul? So there's all kinds of stories about changing names, so we'll pursue that even more. And if you have any more good name change stories, let me know, okay?
Absolutely. It's very interesting. And there is a reward out there if you can track down Jack Scott.
There it goes. Thank you, Bob. We appreciate it.
Good to talk to you, Stan. Have a great day. And tell your wife, whatever her name is today, greetings from Bob.
I will do that. Okay. Whoever she is, whatever she is today, Bob still likes you, right?
That's for sure.
Okay. Take care, Bob. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there we go. Wasn't that a fun story? And Bob always has, after many, many, many years, over a half century in radio, and he's met world-famous people and musicians all over, and he's going to be back on Interesting Ideas quite a bit. And he'll tell us more great stories. He would say, I'm just kind of full of it, and he is indeed. And so my wife Karen will have to make a decision about what kind of name she wants to use. Well, that might be encouraging to her. Well, there's all kinds of reasons that people change their names, obviously, personally, professionally. And there are some people who are saying, I'm going to have a new start. And we may even talk about why did Jesus change Peter's name to Rocky? That's what it meant, Petra, the rock. And why did St. Paul change his name from Saul to Paul? And we don't know. Some people think they do, but we're not sure. And there are a lot of reasons that people may decide to change their names. And here's the interesting point: is my dear bride, the young woman that I married many years ago, named Karen Johnson. Well, that's the name she's continued on with, of course, Karen Johnson Houston. But just to give you an idea of what some people might do, many of you know of the actress Whoopi Goldberg. Truly, Whoopi Goldberg is truly a stage name. Her birth name was Karen Johnson. So all kinds of friendly and funny stories to put together. I also have a little story of a name change that I might share with you because I think it might add more of a serious note to it. A number of years ago, I was giving leadership to a conference in our church of some significant people about the events of world missions. And there was a writer who I had come across, and I really came to admire him and his writings. And so I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could have him come and speak at our conference? Well, make a long story short, it took a time to do it. But then Brennan Manning decided that he would come and visit with us at our church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it was my privilege to arrange all that. And I went to pick him up at the airport, and he got in and started just exchange some pleasantries. But he stopped me quite quickly, and he said, "Stan, let me ask you a very personal question. Do you know anything about AA, Alcoholics Anonymous?" Well, I didn't know quite where to go with that. I said, "Well, yeah, I've heard of Alcoholics Anonymous." And he said, "Well, good. Do you know of anybody who is in AA?" And I said, "Well, yes, I do, because we actually have an AA group that meets on Sunday nights in our church. And one of my best friends he's a proud member of AA." And he said, "Can you give me his phone number and his name? Just his first name. Can you give me his phone number and his name?" And I said, "Well, yes, I can. I'm sure he wouldn't mind, because I know a little bit about how that organization works." And he said, "You need to know that wherever I am, I need to be within 10 or 15 minutes of making a phone call to somebody who understands and can help me get through a bad time." I didn't know that, but it was an incredible story. And so I gave him the name of my friend, and quickly, as soon as I dropped him off at the hotel, I called my friend Charlie and told him what I had done, and I didn't know how he'd respond, but he said, "Absolutely, Stan, for sure. That's what I do. I do that quite often. I have people who are calling for support, calling for help. That's who I am." I said, "I didn't know that." He said, "Well, it's anonymous. Remember, we don't talk about those things." And I said, "Well, then it's okay." He said, "Of course it's okay. I would be expecting him to call me at any time, morning, noon, and night, if he needed encouragement or needed some help to get through it." So I share that story with you, and that just tells us something about what the life of good people can be about. And this very famous speaker obviously had a story that AA was a part of. But then as I got to know him a little bit, I just was talking about some of his life story. And he said, "You know, my name isn't really Brennan." And I said, "No? Well, okay. Is it kind of a pseudonym, a pen name, a writer's name?" Well, he said, "No. It's a name I use, and I use it all the time." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Well, let me tell you why." And I said, "I'd love to hear the story." He told me about being in the Korean War, so it dates him, but he's an older man, just, Korean War. And he said, "We were in a very bad battle, and a grenade was thrown, and my best friend next to me threw himself on the grenade, and it killed him immediately, but it saved my life." Can you imagine what it's like to live all of your life knowing that somebody died because of you? I said, no, I can't even begin to imagine that. Of course, I could think maybe of Jesus, but, I didn't. Well, you can sense my knowing not where to go with that. And he said, because of that, his name was Brennan. And so I decided that I was going to change my name to Brennan so that in some way, hopefully, I would be encouraged to live up to his bravery and his courage and who he was and what he had done for me. So whenever I hear my name, I know that, you know what? That's not my name, but I've taken that name and as a way of honoring and perhaps living up to the man who saved me. Again, just let that story sit on your head for a while. And I oftentimes thought about that. I wonder if there's people out there that in some way I could honor them by changing my name. Would I ever live up to taking their name? Well, there's more to talk about. We may do this again. For instance, again, St. Paul. Why did he be Paul when he had been Saul? How come Peter, Petros, was from some other name? And Jesus gave him a new name. Ever thought about maybe God giving you a new name? What would you like it to be if you had to take a new name? All kinds of good things, not just because they're interesting, because they could be in many ways transforming. And that's what we're all about. So I just thought that I would share that little story with you today. Well, if you will permit me a little shameless self-promotion. By the way, Bob talked about people who go on the radio have to change their name oftentimes. They have a stage name or a radio name. Well, have you ever thought about being on the radio? Well, you can be. Just as I am. I've been on in big stations, but I'm actually having probably just as much reach and just as much fun with this small little podcast, which is going and growing. And because of that, our new company, What It Takes Radio, is here, dedicated to helping you be on the radio. Now, my dear friend Brennan has passed on, but I know if I were able to reach out to him today, because he had such wonderful stories and he was a wonderful speaker. When people came to speak, it was overwhelmed. People were just deeply moved by his stories. And today, I know he'd probably say, Stan, can I tell some of my stories so the other people around the world can hear them? He wrote books. And now he perhaps could provide programs and highly inspirational messages. Well, I'm sure he would probably join up with our work at What It Takes Radio. But we would like you to consider that you are an interesting person, that God has gifted you with some unique and interesting ideas, and now you can share them. First of all, maybe you want to give it a try by saying, Stan, could I be on your program and share an interesting idea? You can. We'll talk about that. And then I'm going to say, well, wouldn't you like to do this on your own? Perhaps have your own program, your own platform, your own way of sharing your wisdom, insight, and truth, and perhaps telling some of the significant stories in your life that might be helpful and useful to others. Well, why don't you reach out to me? And it's stanhusted@gmail.com, stanhusted@gmail.com. Check our website out at witradio.net. That's witradio.net. WIT stands for What It Takes, and it also stands for Wisdom, Insight, and Truth, because we want to share that with the whole wide world, and you have some to share, so I hope you will join us on the radio. So there we go. Thank you for your time, your energy. Think about these things. Share them with others. We are grateful when you recommend our program to others, too. I'm Stan Husted. Wishing you all the best and be blessed.